Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss an article in the Sunday Times today which reports on Conservative hopes that they can engineer a stunning comeback in time for the next general election by tapping into the significant number of potential voters who currently don't know which box they will be ticking in 2024. However, there are potentially a few small flaws in the plan. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, Labour have had a lead in the YouGov polls for over a year now. For the past half a year, it's actually been quite a substantial lead. That being said, bitter experience and a keen interest in the process does not allow me to be complacent. I've often described the situation as coming back for the second half of a football match when your team's 3-0 up. You can sit there, enjoy the occasion, you sort of know your team's going to win. But the players on the pitch have to remain laser focused on every single play of the game, or that lead could be wiped out. Same thing here. I'm an observer. I don't really see a credible way for the Tories to come back here. But for those actively driving Labour's campaign, they can't allow themselves a moment of peace. They can't think that the job's done, just stay the course. There is more still to do. You know, the poll lead is only an indicator. Come the election, because we use first past the post, a poll lead doesn't really make any difference if your support is not concentrated. You know, Labour could win more votes than the Conservatives and still lose the election. It doesn't often happen, but it has done. You know, but it can happen. A party can form a majority government without having the most votes. And it has always formed a majority government without a majority of votes throughout my lifetime. First past the post really is a mockery of democracy in the modern world. Even if Labour do win a decent majority at the next election, it won't be by smashing it up and down the country. It won't be like huge leads coming in for these seats they're flipping. It will be by doing what the Conservatives did in 2019, winning a lot of seats by like a few thousand votes. I remind people that Boris Johnson didn't actually win many more votes in 2019 than Theresa May did in 2017. It was like a few 100,000, 300,000 more votes. Proportionally tiny. But Theresa May lost her majority. Boris Johnson won a large one. The aim of the game is concentrating your poll lead into the right seats. And this article in today's Sunday Times suggests that the Conservatives can tap into the don't knows in the red wall, for example. Now, in theory, if they could do that, they could indeed turn things around. You know, the Conservatives are getting ready to con these left behind areas ahead of the next election. Remember, in terms of the three main factors that flip the red wall, Corbyn, Brexit, levelling up. Corbyn, Brexit are gone. So it's only levelling up now. And I noticed that there's a scheme designed to allow more money to be given to these poorer communities for long-term projects, you know, to help regenerate the areas, because they're certainly not getting money from the government. No doubt the money will arrive just in time to let people think that the government are delivering on levelling up, but not enough time for them to see any benefit from the funding. Classic Tory con job. Flash the cash just before an election with the promise that there's more to come if they win power. They win the election and the tap is immediately turned off. Or it turns out that the money doesn't actually do much because it ended up in the pockets of Tory donors or politicians. The article says that now that Sunak has steadied the ship again, which he has done, he's ready in the new year to announce a load of new policies. The article says that these will include anti-strike laws, more immigration nonsense and a plan for the NHS backlog. So if we look at these, if these are going to be his main policy areas in terms of their impact on the red wall. Now, on the immigration asylum front, yes, there are a lot of xenophobes in the red wall who are fooled by the rhetoric. Ordinarily a rich seam for the Tories. Basically, you've got a load of people where there is genuine unemployment, where you've got people who can clearly see that they're not enjoying the standard of living that seems to exist around the country, and you can fool them into thinking it's the fault of immigrants, not the very wealthy. The problem is, Conservatives are in government, and they seem to be failing on the causes of concern. So people willing to use their vote on immigration and asylum issues may be more likely to go with Reform UK. Now, Sunak may wish to get the sort of deal that Johnson got, whereby the party stands down candidates in seats currently held by Conservatives, but the price for that will be a very right-wing manifesto. But, you know, if they could get that, that would be dozens of red wall seats where he wouldn't be facing up against Reform UK. But if he has to take on Reform UK candidates, he could be facing a bit of a trap. Because let's say the government actually deal with the issue with some practical policies, and it looks like to these people, oh, they have dealt with the asylum and immigration issues that we've got such a problem with. Well, what would be the need for those people to vote on that issue anymore if it's been dealt with? If it's fixed, they will consider another issue to be a higher priority use of their vote, like local healthcare, for example. And if the government don't fix it, they just present yet another plan that will totally work this time, promise, then Reform UK will surely swoop in. So this attempt at winning over red wall voters is not doomed to failure, but it is very high risk. Then there's the anti-strike legislation being proposed. That's surely a non-starter in the red wall. This is an attempt to grind down the poorly paid workers who were voting Conservative in 2019. And in the red wall, there's a greater reliance on public sector workers for the local economies as well. Now, I don't know yet what exactly the government are proposing here because they haven't published anything. But it's hard to see how trying to bring in legislation to keep their target voters in poverty is going to help Sunak tap into the don't knows. Then there's the NHS backlog. Now, if Sunak clears that, he will absolutely be the golden boy in many voters' eyes, particularly the elderly voters who vote in large numbers. Problem is, he's not going to, is he? He'll say he is, but he's not going to. He is the Chancellor who stripped the NHS of even more funding, sending it into the private sector instead. As Prime Minister, he's trying to force medics into real terms pay cuts. There are already severe shortages. This will just make them worse. It's all very well Sunak saying that the NHS is a huge personal priority. I mean, I agree. I think it is for him. I think it's an absolute priority for him that he breaks it up and sells it to the private sector with all haste. But it's not going to help him clear the backlog. Then there are the more general problems that Sunak's got in engineering this turnaround in fortunes. So first of all, let's say he comes up with a legislative programme which could win over lots of undecided voters. There are definitely lots of undecided voters there, enough to win the election. Okay, fine. Can he get it passed by his own MPs? Because the work of the government throughout this parliament has been starkly at odds with public priorities. So he would have to do an about face on a lot of policy areas. In order to push an agenda that will make the Tories more electable, he needs his MPs to take the next election seriously and rein in their excesses a bit. But unless he can convince his MPs that a win is possible, it seems unlikely he'll win that argument. Like, if you tell Tory MPs that we can absolutely win the next election, we just have to go a little slower on the theft of the nation's assets, they'll think, okay. But if they think, no, because we're going to lose the next election anyway, you know, they'll be ripping the copper wiring out of the walls with all haste, thinking they've not got long left to finish feathering their nests. We also know that there are groups of Tory MPs who still want Sunak brought down and Johnson brought back. If Johnson survives the Privileges Committee inquiry, that is at least if he remains an MP after it. And if the local elections go badly, there is every chance they will be much more robust in their challenges next summer. And the local elections will be absolutely crucial for Sunak. He doesn't have 2 years to get ready for the election. He's got 5 months. Labour should make major gains this May. The same council seats were up for grabs in 2019. Now, take your mind back to 2019. Labour and the Conservatives were both suffering very badly in the polls. In fact, the top two parties in the polls were the Brexit Party and the Liberal Democrats. Was it the Brexit Party then or still UKIP? No, it was the Brexit Party and the Liberal Democrats. So, you know, there was quite a lot of seats lost by Labour and the Conservatives, really. And Labour will be expecting to get those seats back. Now, it could be argued the Conservatives will expect to pick some up as well. But the Tories are the party in government who are presiding over a deep recession and severe cost of living crisis. And their current poll rating is round about what it was in 2019 during those last local elections. Whereas Labour are the resurgent government in waiting. Sunak can't play a long game here. If he does not pull a rabbit out the hat for May, there are factions within the Conservative Party who are already seeking to undermine him, who will step up their game. They will use the local election failures as evidence that he's going to lose the general election as well. Then there's Sunak himself. He's not a good politician. He may be wise enough to surround himself with canny political strategists, we'll see, and follow their lead. That will help enormously if he is. But, you know, you give him a photo opportunity or a debate, and these will come thick and fast during the election campaign. Can't hide from them. Even Johnson couldn't hide from all of them. And Sunak has shown no signs of learning to manage them. You know, his recent failure at that Christmas Eve homeless shelter photo op shows just how badly out of touch, not just that he is, but that he presents himself. Unlike Johnson, Sunak doesn't actually know how to even appear relatable, let alone be relatable. Finally, it's all very well saying that there are lots of undecided voters to tap into. There always are midterm. Absolutely, the Conservatives have the capacity to win a lot of those don't knows to their side in the election itself. You know, and Sunak, if he can dodge all the obstacles in his way, has up to 2 more years to calm things down, present himself as a safe pair of hands for those who would rather vote Tory than Labour. Yes. And although the article isn't just engaging in spurious empirical thinking, it does actually have a polling exercise at its core. It may be downplaying the potential for Labour to pick up undecided voters. Because, you know, Labour are leading in the polls, but they haven't yet presented a core vision to voters. If you sort of say, what is Labour's... Labour have now presented various policies, individual policies, fine. But when you sort of say, OK, with Labour in power, what will the country look like in 3 years? They haven't presented that yet. They haven't presented that vision. They will have to do so. But so far, they've been keeping their powder dry. Presumably, they wanted to make sure that the Prime Minister who they'll be taking on was in place and see which way they'll jump. So they may still be waiting to see which way Sunak jumps with his campaign platform. And it may well be that as 2023 goes on, that is the year that Labour launch their vision. You know, a strong narrative for the future of the country under Labour. That will be attractive to undecided voters as well. And because of the 2 parties, it's currently Labour who are focusing on their target voters right now. They may also be more likely to make those gains. The Conservative leadership are constantly dealing with internal politicking, distracting them from longer-term plans for the election. You can't focus on a long-term plan when you've got short-term challenges. It's all right, Sunak saying he wants to work on this plan that lets his party peak at the election, the timing of which he will have the advantage of choosing, all being well, for him, but his party are not behind him. There are political assassins out and about. He is having to focus on short-term survival, and he will constantly have to do so unless and until he can convince the wider party that he can win the next election. And the only way to do that is either by reversing Labour's poll lead, which doesn't seem all that credible in the short term, or by doing well in the local elections, which seems just as fanciful. Now, I'm not saying Labour can't lose from this position. As I said at the start, they do have more to do. They absolutely have more to do. Fortunately, this may be one advantage of having a leader like Starmer who seems excessively cautious. You know, I'm quite sure he won't be complacent. But it is a complex issue. There are lots of don't knows. You know, I'll try and discuss individual elements of it as and when it seems relevant as the year rolls merrily on. I do think the polls this June will be very interesting. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.